Hello, and thank you for joining us for this discussion on catalyzing career connections. I'm George Vinton, CEO of Common Group, and I'm joined by three knowledgeable and passionate panelists for our recorded session today. While we won't be able to engage with our audience live, we do encourage our viewers to get in touch at info@catalyzechallenge.org with questions and comments. Before we start, I'd like to take a moment to introduce our panelists. First, we're joined by Annabelle Cialini, Chief Strategy Officer, American Student Assistance. ASA provides young people in middle and high school the tools and resources to make informed choices about their futures. Second, Gorik Ng, best-selling author of The Unspoken Rules, Secrets to Starting Your Career Off Right, researcher with the Harvard Business School managing the Future of Work project, and career advisor with a focus on first-generation students. And finally, Eric Chan, partner at Charter School Growth Fund, an organization finding the country's best public charter schools, funding their expansion, and helping to increase their impact. Welcome, all of you. So our conversation today is about creating connections between education, learning, and career. And to get us started, I'd like to ask our panelists to respond to a big question. Why should we connect education and career? And why should we do it now? Annabelle, can I pass it to you for a first response?
Thank you, George. ASA as an organization has been around for about 60 years, mostly as a student loan guarantor. And we pivoted our mission about 3 years ago to focus on this issue of allowing young people to explore and experiment with their career options. And the reason for that was that we were working with so many young people who had made or not made deliberate choices about going to college, were partway through, had incurred debt, and were feeling lost about their direction. And we felt that that's a very expensive way for young people to experiment. What we see is the opportunity for young people as early as middle school start to understand themselves, see what sort of options are out there, and make really great, have a chance to experiment so they can try things out earlier, and then make really great decisions about their post-secondary transitions. What we've learned from organizations like OECD is that perceptions about self and possibility cement at a really early age, and that was one of the reasons that our work starts as early as middle school. In fact, one of our grantees starts in kindergarten, but the majority of our work starts in that middle school space. And also the aspirations are shaped, molded, and sometimes restricted by gender stereotypes, socioeconomic background, and importantly, who a young person knows in their life. And so the more that we can start to break the mold of some of that and give kids exposure and build equity into this process, our hope as a nonprofit is that we will create the sort of economic mobility that we hope to achieve by giving young people these kinds of experiences. And to your point about why now, George, I think particularly now, as we sort of our young people start to go back into school, the world is looking like a very different place. A lot of young people are very disengaged right now. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that actually getting young people to refocus on their futures and their possibilities is going to be a very powerful way to reorient them and get them re-engaged in the work that they want to do over the next few years in their K-12 education.
Thank you, Annabelle. Eric, can I pass it to you?
Sure. Thanks, George. So as George mentioned, my organization has the privilege of working with some of the nation's best public charter schools. Many of them have focused on getting students to succeed in college because that's been the surest ticket to economic opportunity. And these organizations have had amazing results and seen college graduation rates 4, 5, even 6 times comparable national averages. And these organizations have been doing this for 20 plus years. And, more recently, they've started to ask the question, how are our alumni doing in early adulthood? So in 2019, we partnered with 8 of these organizations and Bain to survey over 1,000 alumni to understand how their K-12 experience translated into their early career outcomes. And we were moved by some of the findings from that study. So I thought I'd just share a couple of highlights. First, when we surveyed all of our alumni, only 35% of these young alumni earned more than $40,000 a year. And $40,000 was the salary many reported feeling financially stable. Just to give you some context, the average age of these alumni was, early to mid 20s. So really focused on young adults. The second thing we learned was even with an excellent K-12 education, many of the disparities we see in our country, in our economy persisted. Alumni made less than their average peers nationally, regardless of their post-secondary education levels. And these gaps were even wider for alumni of color and women. The third big thing we learned was, a college degree still does provide a significant advantage in the workplace, but it doesn't guarantee a strong launch into career. We found that 40% of our alumni who did have bachelors held a job that did not require their 4-year degree. And we saw a huge range in income and earnings, even across these students who had a bachelor's degree. Maybe most interestingly, when we studied some of the behaviors that led to strong early career outcomes, we noticed that some career-oriented behaviors did have a significant impact. Things like career exposure, choice of major, internship experiences, having mentors or personal connections, and the use of career services at some institutions, all that mattered. All this to say, I think the research and data confirmed what many leaders already sensed, which is while we had gone quite far, there was still more work to do. And the alumni that we support have amazing talents and gifts. And many leaders started to ask the question, what more can we do in K-12 to make that transition just a little bit easier?
Thank you, Eric. Gorik, same question to you. Why should we connect education, learning, and career, and why should we do it now?
Because career navigation remains an oral tradition. If you have parents who've been there, done that, these are lessons and conversations you're having over the dinner table. If you are, like me, the son of a working class single mother who left school when she was 12 years old, my mom had high expectations of me, but she also didn't have the knowledge of what's out there to help me navigate from where I was to where I wanted to go. I didn't actually even know where I wanted to go. And I see this day in, day out as I work with students through the TRIO Upward Bound program, through my book, The Unspoken Rules, in my role as a former career advisor at UMass Boston, and with my work through The Unspoken Rules with early career professionals who've just transitioned from school to work, where so many of their experiences are the exact same experiences that I had looking back, where when I speak with high school students about where they'd like to be, one of the students the other day told me, well, what if I'm not LeBron James or I'm not Beyonce? I can't sing like that. I can't dunk like that. What career paths are even available to me? So much of the exposure that students have, especially from low-income backgrounds, is through the media. It's not necessarily through these career conversations that are happening in these more privileged households. And so as a result, not knowing what's even out there leads to a persistence problem, because students don't necessarily see the relevance of what they're learning in the classroom and how it relates to where they might want to take their careers in the future. When it comes to college students or those who are beyond high school, these students are doing their career navigation the day before graduation, where I remember, and this is a common topic of conversation among career advisors, is those really important conversations, they're happening the day before graduation, when a student walks into the career office and asks, what can I do with my history degree? And the conversation ends up going down the path of, well, you can do anything you want, which is somewhat of a dissatisfying answer to a student who, like me, thought of higher education as the ticket to a better life. And so when you go through the 4-year process, the 2-year process, or whichever other pathway that you might be pursuing, you get to the end of that experience only to realize that career discovery is happening in the form of clicking through job postings aimlessly. And these are really conversations that could have happened a lot earlier on. And when I speak to students, and just thinking back to my own experience going from school to work, there's so much that school doesn't teach about how to survive and thrive in the professional world, in the working world, where how do you manage expectations? How do you take ownership? How do you show up? How do you build relationships? How do you navigate from an entry-level position to a position of leadership? How do you climb that career ladder? So much of this is, again, a matter of tacit knowledge. It's learned through trial and error, even though it could be systematized and delivered to students a lot earlier on. And when I think about the question of why now and why today, with the COVID-19 pandemic, what I've seen in my work is that there's been a big disparity between students who have stable internet access, who have stable incomes, who have a stable living situation, who've been able to do a lot of this career discovery on the side, where they're taking on multiple internships introduced to them by their parents, and they're able to juggle school and work without the familial and the financial burdens. Meanwhile, students who are from first generation, low income communities of color, a lot of them have been able, have taken the very opposite approach, where because of family and financial circumstances, have had to put their education on pause and or juggle school and work in a way that they were always doing, but to a much greater degree now, where what I'm starting to see among students is there's really a bifurcation between students who have been able to emerge from the pandemic with multiple internships and multiple career conversations and even more mentors that they've been able to connect with through their parents, mentors, and immediate social networks. And those who are continuing to fight fires and really don't see a path out of lower paid jobs. And at the same time, can't really pivot back onto the career path that they would like, because making money is so important. So to be able to systematize these conversations would hopefully not only increase and address the student persistence problem, the graduation problem, the student debt problem, but also the economic inequality problem.
Such rich and powerful points, all of you. Thank you very much. And I think the through line that I hear is in many ways the equalizing of opportunity that currently exists for some through social networks, through family structures, through privilege that's passed down and wealth that's passed down through generations, and working to unpick that is one of the opportunities of the connections between education, learning, and career. So thank you all for your comments. I'd like to move to a more detailed question, which is, so what does it mean to connect education and career? What is that? What are we talking about when we say that? And Eric, maybe I can come to you first. So how do you think about what that looks like in the real world?
Thanks, George. I actually think it's more of a, often I find it's more of a philosophical than a detailed question when I talk to folks. And in many ways, this is the big question we're all trying to explore. Often when I have this conversation with folks in our world, education and career and college and career are often pitted against one another. And there's a choice, a false choice often that folks make between the two. And for me and for us, we think that both an excellent education and career-oriented experiences give students the best shot at early career success. And, in terms of the details of what it means to connect them, I think leaders will have different visions for what this looks like based off of the students and communities they serve and their own creative energy. But I will name, as we try to learn from parents, families, and students, a couple themes did emerge in our study that I referred to earlier. One, just building on Gorik's point, actually, the majority of parents want their children to leave high school with a career focus or goal in mind before they start any kind of program or study. And they want their children to have the opportunity to learn and discuss career options in high school. The second thing I'll just name is our alumni have named, it has not been easy to navigate the world of work, even if you have a vision for what you want to do. Many wish that they had things like career experiences or mentors who could have helped guide them and learn more in high school and after high school.
Thank you, Eric. Gorik, I'd like to come to you next. How do you see the ability to connect education, learning, and career, and what do you think that might look like in practice?
Yeah, I feel like the conversation in the workforce development space has focused a lot on technical skills and soft skills for good reason. What is missing in this conversation are navigational skills, the ability to navigate ambiguity, to navigate systems, to be able to navigate from where you are to where you want to go. And so as I think about the three populations of students that I work with on a regular basis, students who are in middle school and high school, students who are at a post-secondary pathway, and those who are in their first and second jobs, I start thinking about how do we better close the gap between where people are and where people want to go, and to pave a smoother path for these individuals. So for those who are in middle and high school, I think a lot about how do we help students understand and appreciate and have a sense of how their education fits in with their broader career paths. That way we can hopefully address the student persistence problem by showing students that there is in fact a tie-in between what's being taught in school and their future selves. For those who are on their way to a post-secondary pathway or in a career or in a post-secondary pathway, I think a lot about how do we have these career conversations earlier on so that it's not happening the day before or the day after graduation, so that conversations around resumes, cover letters, building relationships, navigating the ambiguous world of job postings and all of those things is happening earlier. And students are able to pick their courses and path of study in a more deliberate manner versus just picking it, going through this process through trial and error, wasting time, incurring debt, and really having that much harder of a time the longer they take through the process. And then for students and early career professionals who are in their first jobs, I start thinking about how there's really, there's so much that students are learning through trial and error once they enter into the workplace. And how do we help these students build these career navigation skills before they show up, so that employers would hopefully open up more career opportunities and job opportunities at the entry level. So there isn't this assumption that hiring a young person is a waste of time, it's going to be more burden than it's worth. If students can show up in the workplace, ready to show up, ready to take ownership, ready to communicate professionally, ready to manage expectations, so many of these career soft and navigational skills, I'd like to think that we can unlock opportunity for a lot more people. So shifting, not necessarily shifting rather, but including navigational skills in the conversation alongside technical and soft skills is something that I'd love to see.
Thank you, Gaurav. And we've spoken in the past about that some of the barriers that exist in that getting into the first job, or an individual's early stage career, and in some ways the sort of relatively short distance that there is to travel to overcome those barriers. As you said, it's some behavioral skills, but behavioral skills which can be embedded throughout a person's education, and certainly into that connected career and educational and learning space. Annabelle, to you, how do you see this? What do you think it means to really connect education, learning, and career?
Well, I completely agree about the skills piece. One of the great challenges that we see is that, for a middle schooler today who may be emerging into the world of work of 2030, it's very difficult to have a crystal ball about where the labor market will be, what those jobs and roles are, and potentially what those qualifications required will be. I think what we do know, and we did some burning glass last year, is a sense of what the skills are that those young people will need, and that specifically transferable skills that might actually be able to move with them through multiple pathways. One of the things that we are very interested in is reaching young people where they are. If you happen to be the parent of a middle or a high schooler, they're on their devices most of the time. And so we've done some work which we think is very interesting in connecting young people with some early career exposure and exploration online where they are, and have been able to reach them. And I think one of the things, and we don't know what the right dosage or what the right types of interventions are, but are there ways that we can also reach young people informally, as well as through the sort of traditional systems, to give them access and exposure perhaps to people like them doing jobs that they've never heard of, give them opportunities to meet a mentor or connect into a micro internship, or find out more about a particular career pathway. So one of the things that we are looking at is sort of how we might connect young people in a way. I think the other thing that we've really been thoughtful about, and a lot of our work is very centered on understanding what young people are looking for. And it's been really interesting. This is a generation that's growing up who are very interested in social justice, in the environment. They want to be their own bosses. And I think it's really important that we're not just sort of telling them what the labor market needs, but we're actually thinking about helping them navigate careers in areas that they have an interest and a passion and a motivation around too.
Thank you, Annabelle. And that point resonates deeply. We've seen a huge increase in the number of young people hoping to pursue entrepreneurship as a career path at multiple stages of education, which just goes exactly to your point. And I will just say, I looked actually at the American Student Assistance website yesterday, just to remind myself, and the new work that you all have been doing in terms of creating really engaging content for young people, I think stands out as an exemplar for how some of this work can be done and how it can be brought to life. So just want to say, huge congratulations for that work. It's really inspiring. One question that sort of follows on from what we've just been talking about, what do we think of when we think education, learning, and career? What do we not know? And maybe I'll just open this up to anyone who feels compelled to respond. What are we trying to figure out? Because I think for all of us, we know that there are lots of unanswered questions. So would love to open up for anybody who might have a thought on that as to what we're really looking for that we don't currently know.
Ooh, well, I have a question about experiential learning. So, I think we have a hypothesis that is a really powerful way to both engage a young person, but also to give them a real sense of what it would be like. But I don't know that it needs to be an 8-week internship or a 14-month apprenticeship. Could somebody get as much or 80% of the experience from something that was more micro? And could it actually be quite a young person? Could a 14-year-old have that sort of experience and it have that same sort of catalytic impact on how they thought about themselves and their futures? So that's one question that I'm thinking about a lot right now.
I can jump in as well. Something that I've been thinking about a lot is how to overcome the chicken and egg problem of you need relevant experience to get relevant experience, and no one's willing to give a chance to someone who's unproven. And as I think about how any of us climb that career ladder, it took a person to give us a chance when we were going from nothing on our resumes to something on our resumes. And there's great work being done in terms of offering take your kids to work day type experiences, but those aren't necessarily resume building experiences. On the other end, there are internship experiences that are often a function of your social and cultural capital in order to access. And for students who are working, let's say in retail and sales and customer service, there is unfortunately a relatively sticky floor to those jobs where they don't necessarily lead to an upwardly mobile career. So how do we convince employers to overcome this chicken and egg problem? I have an hypothesis, and it's one of employers really valuing these soft skills of problem solving, communication, teamwork, et cetera, but school not necessarily teaching it. So my question then becomes, how do we better teach these skills to students so that hopefully we can convince employers to be able to say, well, actually, I'm going to get something valuable out of this relationship. It's not just CSR. How do we better solve this at scale is something that I've been thinking a lot about and would love to investigate more.
Both of what you both shared really resonated. Some questions, George, on my mind are, first, just thinking about our school leaders. There's so much we already ask of them in terms of just running an excellent school and preparing students and families in all the many ways they do, and adding career on top of that, building employer partnerships, creating rigorous career experiences. We want all those things, but when I speak to leaders, it's a challenge of how do I prioritize and how do I balance? So one wondering I have is how do we make it easier for schools to partner more closely with employers and offer these rigorous exploration and training experiences? The second wondering I have is, I sense there are probably high stake moments, and Gorg knows these better for alums and students in terms of pivotal moments around their career trajectory. It could be in their selection of major, it could be in how to get their first internship, and it could be how to get their first job, as three examples. And how can we better prepare our young adults for those moments is one thing on my mind.
Wonderful, thank you all. So next I'd like to move to examples of good practice or sort of features that we think of that are really going to hold up this movement towards career connected learning. And so I'd love to actually come to you first, Eric, in terms of maybe a couple of inspiring models that you've seen, and particularly, I know that you feel strongly in terms of the importance of community involvement and proximate leadership in this space. So I'll allow you to take this in whichever direction you like, but we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Sure. I mean, we've had the privilege of backing several entrepreneurs trying to think deeply about this question. I'll just highlight two or three examples. One high school we work with created a partnership with the largest healthcare system in their region to provide a range of learning and training opportunities across healthcare for their students. And their model is designed to provide both a rigorous college prep academic experience and career training, so students could learn more about what they want to do and potentially have experiences that would allow them to get better jobs to work their way through college. Gork referred to many students now both working and going to school. Another high school we support partnered with a range of corporations and companies in their community to create what they called industry design challenges, to take actual real problems these companies were grappling with and to allow students to wrestle with those and design solutions and present them to those organizations. One, so they could just learn about a wide range of industries, and two, to actually do work and have examples and exemplars and buildings and build skills that they could share with future employers.
Thank you, Eric. Annabelle, to you, promising examples, good practices that you're seeing in the space or interesting models?
Yes, well, we're very fortunate to partner with some really fantastic organizations. When I think about the work that we've done over the last 18 months or so, there are some common threads. A lot of the work orients around project-based learning. So the idea that young people are actually really engaged in this work, it's not theoretical, they're actually doing it hands-on. And that, a big key we see to unlocking more opportunities like that is through educator professional development. So we've done a lot of work centered on supporting educators, centered on organizations who have really exciting curriculum. Citizen School has Catalyze, which is a curriculum to connect STEM career education into the science curriculum. Another organization, Nifty, embeds entrepreneurship and project-based learning, but it's coming from the perspective of how do we center on and support our educators. We also, as an organization, bring together our educator grantees, and we think that's really important. There's a ton that these educators are learning and are sharing with us that we can then also sort of help amplify around what's working in the classroom. So that's been really exciting.
Great, thank you so much. And in the interest of time, I might move us on to our final question here. And we haven't talked much about the Catalyze Challenge, which in some ways is the backdrop to this conversation. Catalyze Challenge is an innovation award focused on creating connections between education, learning, and career. And so I'd love to hear from you all, how you see that the Catalyze Challenge can advance career connections, and maybe offer a little bit of your own personal involvement, investment, or sort of support for the challenge and sort of what it's doing. Annabelle, can I come to you first, and maybe you can say a few words about the challenge and how you got involved and what you hope it will achieve.
Yes, thank you, George. So We came together as a group of funders, I want to say 8 or 9 months ago, and started talking about really a sort of common, this conversation actually is the conversation that we've been having, that there is a great opportunity to do more in this space, that there are a number of barriers perhaps to doing more, that we see that there is a great opportunity to source more innovation, look for more ways to more creatively engage young people, to make it easier for school leaders to integrate this into the curriculum, to do more to support our educators, to streamline the connections between employers, community-based organizations and schools. And we found this mechanism of a challenge as a potential way to source innovative ideas. And so as a group of funders, we came together to source innovation, but also to move mindsets, to really sort of have this conversation about what it will take for more of this to happen. To have the conversation that Eric so eloquently talks about, which is this idea of college and career and the need to sort of weave and integrate. And as we see more pathways for young people and more transferable pathways or diverse pathways where their progress is not or is linear, how do we talk about that? And how do we get young people to understand their families, to tell us also what they're hearing, learning, and thinking. So this idea of moving mindsets was really important. And then the learning, because there is so much we don't know in this space. And as a community of funders and people working in this educational space with a particular passion and interest in this area, we just think there is more to be done and more that we can learn together. Rather than acting as individuals.
Thank you so much, Annabelle. And Gorek, you and I have talked in the past about the narrative that holds some of the status quo in place in terms of college or career and what should be prioritized and what shouldn't. From your perspective, how do you see the kind of narrative opportunity and maybe the Catalyze challenge sort of feeding into that?
Yeah, this speaks to points that Eric and Annabelle had made earlier around Annabelle saying mindset. That is one of the big obstacles that stand in the way. And Eric earlier was talking about, the importance of really, shifting this dialogue. And so when I think about career conversations versus academic work, they're often put at odds with each other, to your point and Eric's point earlier. And so what I start thinking about is how do we have these career conversations not be nice to haves, but as have to haves? And how do we see career and vocational pathways as things that people want to do versus that people have to do, as an alternative, as if you don't pursue a 4-year path, this is what's left for you, versus these are really great pathways that you can make an informed choice about, and that may actually set you up for a more successful career than some of the alternatives. So really thinking about how do we shift that mindset. Part of this conversation is certainly a funding obstacle. There's a bureaucratic and policy obstacle. But underlying so much of this is really a mindset obstacle.
Thank you, Gorek. And Eric, last word to you.
Thanks, George and Annabelle and Gorek. I'll just name, we all are approaching this work with great humility. I think our job is to help amazing leaders and entrepreneurs get the resources they need to go after big problems that they're passionate about. And many leaders we speak to think this transition to career is a big problem they want to focus on. So, my hope is the Catalyze challenge can be a resource to help them think about this question and create bold approaches that honor the gifts of their students and unlock more opportunities for them. So we're excited to see the great ideas that come in from across the country.
Thank you, Eric. That point resonates very deeply. And a very heartfelt thank you to all of our panelists today, Annabelle, Gorek, and Eric, for your rich insights and hugely informative comments. We would love for folks who are watching to check out catalyzechallenge.org to learn more about the challenge. You can get in touch with us at info@catalyzechallenge.org if you'd like to speak to a real person. And we wish you all the best for the remainder of your conference. We hope you enjoy the rest of the program, and we thank you for being with us.